Jack clambered among them, the conch forgotten. Come on, follow me! The space under the palm trees was full of noise and movement. Ralph was on his feet too, shouting for quiet, but no one heard him. All at once the crowd swayed towards the island and was gone, following Jack. Even the tiny children went and did their best among the leaves and broken branches. Ralph was left holding the conch with no one but Piggy. Piggy's breathing was quite restored. Like kids, he said scornfully. Acting like a crowd of kids. Ralph looked at him doubtfully and laid the couch on the tree trunk. I bet it's gone tea time, said Piggy. What do they think they're doing on the mountain? He caressed the shell respectfully and then stopped and looked up. Ralph. Hey, where are you going? Ralph was already clambering over the first smashed swaths of the scar. A long way ahead of him was crashing and laughter. Piggy watched him in disgust. Like a crowd of kids. He sighed and bent and laced up his shoes. The noise of the errand assembly faded up the mountain. Then, with the murderous expression of a parent who has to keep up with the senseless ebullience of his children, he picked up the conch, turned towards the forest, and began to pick his way over the tumbled scar. Below the other side of the mountain top was a platform of forest. Once more, Ralph found himself making a cupping gesture. Down there we can get as much wood as we want. Jack nodded and pulled up his underlip. Starting, perhaps, 100 feet below them on the steeper side of the mountain, the patch might have been designed expressly for fuel. Trees, forced by the damp heat, found too little soil for full growth, fell early and decayed. Creepers cradled them, and those saplings searched the way up. Jack turned to the choir, who stood ready. Their black caps of maintenance were slid over one ear like berets. We'll build up a pile. Come on. They found the likeliest path down and began tugging at the dead wood. The small boys who had reached the top came sliding too, till everyone but Piggy was busy. Most of the wood was so rotten that when they pulled it, it broke up into a shower of fragments and wood lice and decay, but some trees came out in one piece. Twins, Sam and Eric, were the first to get likely log, but they could do nothing till Ralph, Jack, Simon, Roger, and Maurice found room for a handhold. Then they inched the grotesque dead thing up a rock and toppled it over on the top. Each party of boys added a quota, less or more, and the pile grew. In their return, Ralph found himself alone on the limb with Jack, and they grinned at each other, sharing this burden. Once more, amid the breeze, the shouting, the slanting sunlight on the high mountain was shed with glamour, that strange invisible light of friendship, adventure, and content. Almost too heavy, Jack grinned back. Not for the two of us. Together, joined in an effort by the burden, they staggered up the last steep of the mountain. Together they chanted 1, 2, 3, and crashed the log onto a great pile. Then they stepped back, laughing with triumphant pleasure, so that immediately Ralph had to stand on his head. Below them, boys were still laboring through some of the small ones had lost interest, and were searching this new forest for fruit. Now the twins, with unsuspected intelligence, came up the mountain with armfuls of dried leaves and dumped them against the pile. One by one, as they sensed the pile was complete, the boys stopped going back for more and stood, with a pink, scattered top of the mountain around them. Breath came evenly by now, and sweat dried. Ralph and Jack looked at each other, while society paused about them. The shameful knowledge grew in them, and they didn't know how to begin confession. Ralph spoke first, crimson in the face. Will you? He cleared his throat and went on. Will you light the fire? Now the absurd situation was open. Jack blushed too. He began to mutter vaguely, You rubbed 2 sticks, He glanced at Ralph, who blurted out the last confession of incompetence. Has anyone got any matches? Make a bow and spin the arrow, said Roger. He rubbed his hands in mime. Psst, psst. Little air was moving over the mountain. Piggy came with it, in shorts and shirt, laboring cautiously out of the forest, and the evening sunlight gleamed from his glasses. He held the conch under his arm. Ralph shouted at him. Piggy, you got any matches? The other boys took up the cry till the mountain rang. Piggy shook his head and came up to the pile. My, you've made a big heap, haven't you? Jack pointed suddenly. His specs. You'd use them as burning glasses. Piggy was surrounded before he could back away. Here, let me go. His voice rose to a shriek of terror as Jack snatched the glasses off his face. Mind out. Give them back. I can hardly see. You'll break the conch. Ralph elbowed him to one side and knelt by the pile. Stand out of the light. There was a pushing and a pulling of vicious cries. Ralph moved the lenses back and forth, this way and that, till a glossy white image of the declining sun lay on a piece of rotten wood. Almost at once, a thin trickle of smoke rose up and made him cough. Jack knelt too and blew gently so that the smoke drifted away. Thickening, and a tiny flame appeared. The flame, nearly invisible at first in the bright sunlight, enveloped a small twig and grew as it enriched with color and reached up into a branch, which exploded with a sharp crack. The flame flapped higher, and the boys broke into a cheer. "My specs!" howled Piggy. "Give me my specs!" Ralph stood away from the pile, put the glasses onto Piggy's groping hands. His voice subsided to a mutter. "Just blurs, that's all. Hardly see my hand." The boys were dancing. The pile was so rotten and now so tinder dry that the whole limbs yielded passionately to the yellow flames that poured upwards and shook a great beard of flame 20 feet into the air. For yards around the fire, the heat was like a blow, and the breeze was a river of sparks. Trunks crumbled to a white dust. Ralph shouted, "More wood! All of you, get more wood!" Life became a race, and with a fire, and the boys scattered through the upper forest. Keep a clean flag of flame flying on the mountain was an immediate end, and no one looked further. Even the smallest boys, unless fruit claimed them, brought little pieces of wood and threw them in the air. The air moved a little faster and became a light wind. The leeward and the windward side were clearly differentiated. On one side the air was cool, but on the other the fire thrust out a savage arm of heat that crinkled hair on the instant. Boys who felt the evening wind on their damp faces paused to enjoy the freshness of it, and then found they were exhausted. They flung themselves down on the shadows that lay among the shattered rocks. The beard of the flames diminished quickly, and the pile fell inwards with a soft, cindery sound, and sent a great tree of sparks upwards, that leaned away and drifted downwind. The boys lay panting like dogs. Ralph raised his head off his forelimbs. "That was no good." Rogers spat efficiently into the hot dust. "What do you mean?" "There wasn't any smoke, only flame." Piggy had settled himself in a space between two rocks that sat with a conch on his knees. "We haven't made a fire," he said. "What's any use? Couldn't keep a fire like that going, not if we tried."